This week's content discusses the advantages and importance of incorporating visual literacy into our classrooms.
Before we begin our readings for this week, we need to address the points made by Christopher Edman in his TED Talk. Edman talks about the importance of magic in the classroom. But what does this mean? Edman addresses a problem in our modern classrooms: engagement. So, what is the difference between the students who sit at the edge of their seat, excited to learn, and the students who feign illness to avoid school at all costs? The difference is the magic. Teachers in education programs are learning about theories and practices, wondering how learning these things will help them be an educator, change lives, and spark magic. Meanwhile, they are being bombarded with the message of encouragement makes your student successful from teachers using non-engaging teaching methods. According to Edman, the problem that teachers and teacher candidates face is a lack of appropriate models. Those persons who are engaging and magical are those people who leave students sitting on the edge of their seats, but according to Edman, most of those people are not teachers. With the proper training, teachers can have the magic, but who should they learn it from? The best models of magic are barbershops, rappers, preachers in the church, comedians, musicians. They are the entertainers of the world. And upon watching them, teachers can observe models to bring magic into their classrooms using the same methods. Engagement checks, like saying amen in a church. Volume, bringing your voice lower to draw them in. Wordplay, excitement, passion. Edman leaves us with the question of why do teacher education programs not give the tools to engage an audience and only provide the skills to analyze learning theories and standards? The most important message from Edman's TED Talk is that magic can be taught, and the best teachers in our schools are those that have learned the art of magic.
In this week's readings, Sean Williams explains how currently we place a large emphasis on verbal literacy in the form of written text. This form of curriculum in our education system may be holding our students back and actually producing illiterate individuals in our highly visual and multimodal modern society. As educators, we strive to produce students equipped with the literacy skills to critically engage with the world, and whether we like it or not, various forms of online communication employ a much fuller integration of visual and verbal media. We need to produce students that have the skills to effectively construct and feel confident in navigating the many modes of information, arguments, and knowledge in various sources of media. Today, this includes print, visual, and digital tools. While we know that this is the case, how often do we just assign purely verbal text essays? This leads into the idea that composition has a verbal bias. When we think of literacy, we immediately jump to our reading and writing. But what about visual literacy? We know we have many visual learners in our classrooms, yet we seem to forget this form of literacy when it comes to teaching skills in literacy. We ask students to practice the writing process by engaging in verbal discussion on complex issues such as race, class, and gender, among others. These topics require interactions between symbols, images, and film, but we too often limit students to research papers and simple text. Only within the last 30 years have we begun to incorporate computers and technology into our classrooms for literacy. Looking back to my time in high school, I mostly recall reading books and writing with pen and paper in all of my literacy courses. The times we incorporated film and images, things really started to click. We could finally see the whole picture as a group and discounted our own images that we had each individually created in our heads. The image really did set the stage. In today's classrooms, we are beginning to incorporate technology into the classroom for these kinds of experiences, but we still mainly teach students to reflect and begin discussions in only verbal forms, as we have a bias to believe that this is what composition is. When we have this bias, we hold our students back. The goal of education is to prepare our students to become productive young adults in society. To do this, they need to be able to identify problems, solve them, and communicate these issues with others. How many times when discussing a problem or issue do you use the words and a visual in a form of a picture or diagram? We know we need both aspects, yet we only work on the verbal process with our students. As teachers, we shape our students' viewpoint of literacy value. Currently, we are demonstrating that there is only one acceptable way of representing the world. In the classroom, we don't value multiple modes of literacy in the classroom, but at the same time, we want our students to know the multiple modes matter. Could be very confusing. When we have this verbal bias, we aren't recognizing the symbolic and expressive possibilities of visuals. This teaches students to value only verbal representations, when usually visual representations really get the point across much more effectively. This table demonstrates the main difference in verbal and visual literacy. Verbal text is conceptual. Words are things we have agreed upon to mean something. William uses the example of sphere. Nowhere in this word does it suggest round. Visual text, on the other hand, is perception. If you see a picture of a basketball, you know it resembles a round sphere without any words. This is useful to the reader as they immediately know what is being described and do not have to be frustrated with a long verbal description. This leads to the most important difference, that verbal text is linear while visuals are relational. You process text and come to a conclusion of what it is telling you by piecing a series of words together to create relationships and patterns. Visuals, on the other hand, do not rely on linear progression and can therefore represent a more complex view of relationships among ideas. When we look at visuals, we can immediately see patterns that can suggest several relationships to us. Ultimately, this tells us that using visuals and verbal text is the most effective. As teachers, we all often use visuals to enhance our students' understandings. Childers, in this week's readings, explains how we can teach writing in a visual culture across disciplines. In ESL, teachers have helped students create a symbolic vocabulary that can be translated into written language. They accomplish this by teaching students how to make marks from the sounds they hear, the words. Students then share these marks they have created using sounds with the class. These marks then become symbols, and students give words to these symbols. This can also help create a safe space in the class for English language learners, as these symbols can't be correct or incorrect, and therefore there is no judgment. In art, students may write detailed descriptions of their own pencil drawings. A classmate may then interpret the verbal description visually by producing their interpretation with a new drawing. The purpose of this kind of assignment is to present a written description that can be interpreted visually. In science, teachers use many modes of visual literacy. Students see models, diagrams, real-life animals, plants, computer programs, and many hands-on labs. With these visual experiences, educators can encourage students to put words to what they see and what they experience. Another way educators can promote visual writing is by first having students develop understanding of concepts through writing, cooperative learning, and peer evaluation. Then, students can work together or alone to create diagrammatic representations of these written responses. This is a great way to also evaluate understanding. The writing allows students to review, rethink, and evaluate material. This is very similar to the writing to learn, which we discussed last week. Through this process, students can develop a notebook that includes both visual representations and written descriptions. In history, we can include photographs from the time periods we are teaching. We can ask students to write a personal journal entry or reflection in the viewpoint of someone who may have been living through that image. Doing this can add more emotion to the subject, leading to further understanding and engagement. Photojournalism is a great source for these style activities. Political cartoons are also a great way to stimulate thinking and writing. Math is another discipline similar to science that relies heavily on visual literacy for understanding. Students are often exposed to graphs and need to be able to decipher what a graph or table is telling them. One way teachers can enhance this visual literacy is by having students write a letter to a family member or younger student attempting to explain various math functions using images to clarify. Various computer programs are also available to help students with these visuals. The use of writing exercises allows students' understanding to move from superficial memorization to a much deeper understanding of complex topics. In English, teachers can help students share written ideas visually using PowerPoint or other visual presentation platforms. This may follow a book summary or a research paper. Foreign language teachers may want to include cartoons with empty bubbles to allow students to read the visual and then create a written dialogue of what they interpret as happening.
As teachers, especially those within ELA settings, we rarely think of drawing as a way to write. Hobson argues this notion in this week's readings. According to Hobson, composition and art go hand in hand, both modes working to convey a message to someone. So, Hobson asks, do we only convey knowledge in one way in the school setting? And why is this a problem? So Hobson asks, why do we only convey knowledge in one way in the school setting? And why is this a problem? It is common knowledge amongst educators that no one learning style can help every person find success. We all learn differently. And this is where the real problem lies, because much of this disparity can be attributed to the difference of learning styles between the teachers and the students. Hobson states that college faculty are predominantly verbal learners. They prefer to interact with new information as printed words. Their students, however, are predominantly kinesthetic learners who prefer to interact with new information via concrete examples, real-life application, practice, and, if possible, hands-on exploration. Because of this, when teachers assign written work and do not allow visual and kinesthetic planning and drafting methods, visual and kinesthetic learners develop anxiety about writing, and these visual learners are taught from an early age that it is verbal proficiency that really counts in school. If strictly written assignments aren't working for all of our learners, what does work? According to Hobson, visually based composition activities, including sketchbooks, doodles, sketches, and pictures are the answer. These multimodal writing methods provide students with opportunities to write in more efficient and flexible ways. Allowing these methods of composition is more efficient for all learners because visual image lies at the root of human thought and subsequent communication. A large portion of human cognition is in images, more linked to pictures and images than words. And by opening up images as a mode of composition, those students who have ideas in their head but cannot communicate them in words will be able to communicate their thoughts and ideas in ways that are conducive to them finding success. Some of you are probably thinking, this idea is nice, but it isn't practical in the classroom. How would I even implement that? Hobson reflects on the methods of one of his teachers and recommends an important tool in implementing multimodal writing in the classroom, the sketchbook. Again, you're probably questioning the productivity and usefulness of sketchbooks in the instruction of writing, but Hobson argues that sketching and doodling is often a more productive pre-writing problem-solving activity than other verbal proficiency activities. Just like any other tool utilized in the classroom, there is a method to the use of sketchbooks, and they must follow some rules in order to be effective. In order to be effective, sketchbooks must be utilized as safe, private spaces where ideas can be listed and manipulated. They must be utilized as a place to record observations, where these ideas and observations can lay dormant to provide time to gain understanding. Sketchbooks are also meant to be a place to detail initial ideas, identify gaps in knowledge, think about and remove ideas from your head, and to problem solve. As a result of meeting these requirements, some or all of them, sketchbooks can become functional tools, images that record important data in a tangible way that memory or reflection simply cannot. This week's readings reflected on the ways in which we can utilize writing and engagement to help students find more success in the classroom. Engagement is that magic in the classroom that some teachers possess and others do not. It is what makes students excited and passionate about the content you're teaching them, regardless of the modality of the content. And it is a teachable skill. Overall, not every person learns the same way, and teaching writing in only one mode is harmful to our students and does not provide them the opportunities needed to find success in showing their content knowledge. By allowing students to draw, to compose, or using other visual literacy skills to show their content knowledge, they will inevitably find more success.